Hi everyone, my name is Richard Vogt, and today we'll be going over my ENPM686 project report proposal slides. Per the recommendations and clarifications by the professor, this is more of a high-level outline of what I'll be doing on the final paper. Let's dive right into it. Under the current state, we know that things are pretty bad. The intrusions have been going on undetected for several months, and that the attackers have been able to leverage several different vulnerabilities. This would indicate that we are dealing with a slightly more sophisticated attacker rather than just some script kiddie. Some of the assets we know the company has include the Windows machines used by the finance department, the Linux computers used by the engineers, and the front-facing website. These are just a few, but some of the others that we might want to look at include the intellectual property of the company, employees' time, and money. These last ones are often not seen as hard assets, just like the physical machines, but they are just as important. This brings us to the point of adequately scoping the project. This project is severely limited by time and money. It is to secure the current systems and potentially look into some mitigations for future equipment that the company may have. Just putting out there as well, I will not be focusing on advanced persistent threats or zero-day exploits. A small company would have probably no ability to mitigate these without significant time, money, and effort. The main goals of my proposed solution are relatively straightforward. First, we want to remove any current compromise. If anything is persisting on the network, we should do our best to remove it. Next, we need to look through and plug any current holes that we know about. This would consist of upgrading any existing software running, closing any open ports that don't need to be open, and turning off any services that should not be running. To implement this plan, we will want to look at the resources that we already have available. We have all these computers and their users, along with what I would hope to be some necessary policies and procedures that should be reevaluated. From the given prompt, there are some gaps in the company's current standing. First off, the lack of or ineffective intrusion detection system. These attacks were going on for months, and there was no way to detect that they were occurring. There is no stipulation of separation of roles within the company. Simple things like if the company computers are all in the same network and where they are physically located. There is no security in depth like requiring strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, policies when it comes to password resets, etc. There is no discussion of the physical resources, like if the entire company is all in the same building. It's now time to get to my proposed solution. This will consist of three main areas, which include enhancing the security posture of the network, improving physical security, as well as implementing robust employee training. Like I previously stated, it is essential to carefully look at every hole that we have in the network. We should look into every port and every service to evaluate if they should still be running. We should implement two-factor authentication, public key infrastructure, and require strong passwords. All of these are parts of locking down the company from a network standpoint. From the physical side, we will need to make sure that all employees have appropriate badges to prevent malicious users from just walking into the building and installing software or stealing physical infrastructure. Some simple things like personal electronic devices should not be plugged into or connected to the company infrastructure. If someone has a virus on their device, there is a possibility that it could jump to the company computers if it is plugged in. There are additional measures to prevent another attack, like lock and unlock procedures, security cameras, and safes. For example, specific company equipment with the most sensitive information should not be connected to the internet at all times. It should be disconnected, placed on physical media, and locked away in a safe. Lastly, when it comes to training the employees, several things need to be done to help prevent any future attacks. Simple things like preparing them on tailgating, not plugging in random USB drives, not connecting personal electronic devices to company infrastructure. There are also other things, like teaching them about phishing emails, what software they should install, and overall building a web of trust between coworkers that they can ask one another if something is okay to do or not. And lastly, having a way for employees to report security problems so that they can be addressed before they become a much larger problem. Along with these three areas, I would have a phased approach broken down into immediate, first month, and long term to address the most severe problems first, and build out from there. This would go into some reoccurring mitigations. For example, as technologies change, we will need to improve our processes, as well as look into what we are not anticipating, but could be a potential avenue for compromise in the future. When it comes to alternative approaches, many technologies are sold and marketed as quick security fixes. For example, having additional intrusion detection systems and firewalls might help to prevent an attack, but could be very costly. There are also some solutions, like putting all resources in the cloud, which people always forget the cloud is just someone else's computer, that needs to be protected in the same way, if not more restricted, than traditional resources. One thing I would like to touch on would be creating honeypots. They could be worth implementing, but would take additional time and resources. With all these chosen approaches and their alternatives, we need to think about the time it takes to set them up. We need to think about the cost to implement them, and not just the cost of the software or hardware, but the employees' times that it takes to bring them all up to speed. This includes the time of retraining all of the employees. Some of the compromises that need to be addressed are the cost, the time, and productivity. How much is the company willing to spend on equipment, software, employees' time, etc.? These things are not unlimited, which will cause some things to not be fully implemented. Some things to consider if I had more money: I would implement a new IDS and several firewalls. I would upgrade all computers and software to the latest and greatest. I would hire additional security personnel. I would even go as far as creating a secure air-gap network for different projects that do not overlap. If the money was reduced, I would focus on immediate remediation, cheaper solutions, and offer low-cost training and repurpose existing equipment to work within the confines of the exercise. As I'm getting near the end of this, I would like to discuss where these ideas came from. Most of these are brought from my personal experience. I've been in the security industry since 2013. For the last 6 or 7 years, I've had to abide by most of the policies myself, to the point that many of them have become second nature. Many of these policies and procedures align heavily with the National Industrial Security Program Operating Manual, otherwise known as the NISPOM, or the DoD Manual 5220.22-M. It is highly focused on security and is a good start. I did not focus heavily on any of the models that we have been taught in class, namely BIBA and BLP. I may borrow some aspects of them in my final paper. I will also most likely go into some security labels in the actual paper, which I was not able to address here. Another aspect that I did not touch on, but will be addressed within the final paper, is employees going to customer spaces and interacting with other systems, as this is an inevitable part of the business and should be discussed. Just some final thoughts to address. This is just an exercise. There are more likely than not some things that I did not address and that I am unaware of. No system is perfect. Even with the best security, this system still has human beings that have to work with them, and they can introduce problems. One of my coworkers once said that you could not legally fix stupid. There will be someone who adds in some software or introduces a vulnerability that you will have to be able to detect and mitigate before it can be exploited.